Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for part 2 of the Vertical Flight Society's Search and Rescue series. Today's event will be focused on military operations. My name is Tuva. I'm the president of the Montreal, Ottawa chapter of the Vertical Flight Society and a program manager for development programs at Bell, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Next slide, Chris. Here's just a quick summary of the executive team here at our VFS chapter for Montreal, Ottawa. If you want any more information, please reach out to any of us. Next slide, Chris. On that note, I just wanted to take a few seconds to talk about the Vertical Flight Society itself and our mission. The VFS was founded in 1943 as the American Helicopter Society, and it's the world's only international technical society for engineers, scientists, and others working to advance vertical flight technology. The Montreal is currently the only chapter of the VFS here in Canada. The mandate of our chapter is threefold. One, to increase interest in vertical flight across Canada. Two, to create a platform to facilitate networking and collaboration. And three, to provide learning opportunities through exclusive conferences like the one we're in today. We're always looking for new members and active participants, so if you are interested in helping to advance vertical flight, please do reach out and join us. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Next slide. So our first speaker will be Captain Stephen Park, from the Canadian Armed Forces Joint Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax. Captain Park joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 2002 and transferred into the Royal Canadian Air Force, or RCAF, in 2010. A CC-130H Hercules Air Navigator by trade, Captain Park has participated in countless SAR operations, both in air and as a coordinator. Over the last year, Captain Park has become the Deputy Officer in charge of the Joint Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where he oversees the aeronautical search and rescue operations of approximately 4.7 million square kilometers of rugged Canadian wilderness, coastline, and vast oceans. So over to Captain Park.
All right, thank you, and hello everyone. I'd like to start out with thanking the chapter for having me. As just mentioned, my name is Captain Stephen Park. I am the Deputy Officer in charge, and I'm also an aeronautical SAR mission coordinator at the Joint Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax. When I was first approached to speak about a rescue that we have coordinated, the Atlantic Destiny was suggested, and I agreed. I thought it'd be a great case to go over. It's a case that I hold pretty close as I work the case as the SAR mission coordinator. I'm sure many of you have heard about the case, as it was a significant national news story. It was a major success that preserved the lives of 31 crew members who were on board and who must have just faced an unimaginably horrific time. And the duress that they experienced must have felt like forever. So next slide. Just a bit of background. The fishing vessel Atlantic Destiny, it was a 141-foot long or 43-meter still-hauled scallop dragger. It had a green hull and white wheelhouse. And on this particular day, it was staffed by 31 crew members. Okay, next slide. So JRCC used a lot of assets for this mission. For the rotary wing, we used two of our Canadian standard CH-149 Cormorant helicopters. They were known as Rescue 907 and Rescue 904, both of which were based out of CFB Greenwood, which is in Nova Scotia. But also we used two American MH-60T Jayhawks. Their call signs were Rescue 6032 and Rescue 6039, and they performed incredibly for us. They were based out of the United States Coast Guard station in Cape Cod. As for fixed wing assets, we used the CC-130H Hercules, also based out of CFB Greenwood. Their call sign was Rescue 343. And we were also provided with an American HC-144 Ocean Century, who came from the air station in Cape Cod. They were Rescue 2313. Lastly, we used the Canadian Coast Guard vessel Cape Roger and their fast rescue craft, and they were located in Shelburne, Nova Scotia. So those were our primary SAR assets, but we also used some vessels of opportunity for communications and assistance. And I'll throw their names out there as well. We had the fishing vessel Cape LaHave, the fishing vessel Atlantic Preserver, fishing vessel Atlantic Protector, and the fishing vessel Maud Adams. Next slide, please. Okay, so this all starts right at midnight Zulu time on the 3rd of March 2021. So we are approaching that 1-year anniversary. Halifax Coast Guard Radio, also known as Halifax MCTS, it's a marine communications and traffic service. They reported to us at the Joint Rescue Coordination Center Halifax a radio call that they received from the fishing vessel Atlantic Preserver. And that vessel was reporting that the fishing vessel Atlantic Destiny was on fire. Because of poor communication conditions between the two fishing vessels and to the land-based Coast Guard radio station, it really hampered the collection of initial information. For example, the number of people on board was provided originally incorrectly, and it's likely from the broken communications. So we at the Rescue Center are trying to figure out where it was, and we were able to use a vessel position reporting system to determine that the vessel was about 120 miles southwest of Cape Sable Island, Nova Scotia. So next slide. So there's a map of the Gulf of Maine. The position of the fishing vessel Atlantic Destiny itself is above the Georges Bank. It's an elevated area of sea bottom in the Gulf of Maine. It's approaching equidistant between Nova Scotia and Massachusetts. This challenging location and the large number of people on board provided a uniquely difficult situation that we couldn't just wait for more information before we needed to act. So within 15 minutes, the Rescue Center had tasked the Coast Guard ship, whose transit was going to be around 8 hours. As well, we had briefed and tasked the Cormorant and the Hercules out of Greenwood. Also, we immediately reached out to Boston's Maritime Rescue Coordination Center to discuss the combined effort of their assets if that was going to become a requirement. So next slide. So we get an on-scene weather report from one of the vessels, and they reported to us that the winds were northwest 40 to 45 knots. They reported a visibility of 3 or 4 miles and a sea state of 5 to 6 meters. And meanwhile, Environment Canada at the same time, they reported in the area an overcast cloud bank. They reported that the winds would be 270 at 55 knots. The temperature was 1 degree, and that the sea state was about 8 meters. Now, at winds at 55 knots, it can be really creating a menacing sea state, and the waves could easily get up to 12 meters, which is like 40 feet. So it was a very challenging situation just based on the weather alone. Next slide, please. So you can kind of follow along with the timeline of everything and how it played out. So not long after the Hercules and Cormorant were tasked, the fishing vessel Atlantic Destiny reported that the fire had been extinguished. However, they had no power. The crew was trying to determine the cause of the fire and if there was any water ingress. But we had the fishing vessel Cape LaHave was standing by only about a quarter of a mile away. And the Atlantic Preserver, the Maud Adams, and the Atlantic Protector fishing vessels were all estimating to arrive on scene themselves in about 2.5 hours after the initial incident. So things were starting to sound like they might have actually been working out and that they were under control. And then at 10 after 1 Zulu time, Halifax Coast Guard Radio called the Rescue Center and reported that the vessel was actually taking on water. So at this point, it's kind of like our worst nightmares coming true. We had to devise a plan that would extract 31 people from a vessel that's not near shore. That would take hours for a round trip of a single helicopter. So we immediately reached out to Boston again, and with them, we tasked the Ocean Sentry and the 2 Jayhawks. Next slide, please. So Rescue 343, the Hercules, is the first air asset to arrive. They were armed with a couple extra sea rescue kits, which are air-droppable life rafts with life-saving equipment. As well, they had some air-droppable submersible water pumps. So the crew brought the Hercules down to 300 feet over the water to try to figure out a way to drop the pumps. But when they released the first one, the gusting 55-knot winds just drifted the pump well behind the vessel, and it was unrecoverable. The Hercules then went to 150 feet, and they lined up for now a non-standard drop in order to try to reduce the wind's effect. When they released this pump, it was recovered by the vessel and was immediately put into action. The Ocean Sentry arrives next, and I use the Hercules and the Ocean Sentry as communication platforms, and they assist with the deconflicting of the airspace throughout the mission. Now at this point, the fishing vessel Atlantic Destiny is reporting that they have no power, they cannot maneuver. They have near zero vessel lighting. They're sitting broadside to the winds and waves, which means they're just taking a real beating from their environment. They're taking on water, and they actually had a second fire in the engine room flash up. And at this point, we've already recommended to them that the crew don their immersion suits. Next slide, please. Rescue 907, the cormorant out of Greenwood, they arrived next, and now the real rescuing portion of this mission can begin. We've already agreed in taking the non-essential personnel first. We're going to leave behind the captain and some of the engineering team. The cormorant plans on taking 16 people. The cormorant crew determines based on winds and the vessel movement to hoist from the stern of the vessel. But the vessel is dead in the water, and the movements are purely affected by the wind and the waves. And I want to point out that hoisting to a vessel that's dead in the water, it can be difficult even in light winds. But they begin the hoisting operations using their inboard hoist. And as expected, the hoisting sequence is challenging, but they managed to get their 2 search and rescue technicians down to the boat. The SARTEC team leader, he met with the captain of the vessel and the first mate to develop the plan for crew evacuation and to explain how to use the rescue basket on the corm. Prior to the first extraction of the 2 crew members, the inboard hoist cable wraps around some of the vessel's rigging and it frays the cable. So Rescue 907 has a backup cable, the outboard hoist, which they switch to. And they then start to evacuate 6 crew members by completing 3 rescue basket sequences. And then while moving from the rest position to overtop the vessel for the 4th rescue basket sequence, 907 ends up having an indication of a possible hydraulic malfunction. The aircraft commander considers it's prudent to abort further hoisting, and they need to fly back to Yarmouth. So Rescue 907 signals to the SARTECs to disconnect the hook, and they leave the scene. This action leaves the SARTECs on board the fishing vessel. So the Rescue 907 spent about an hour and 4 minutes on scene. I requested Rescue 343, the Hercules, to follow 907 back to land and help them and assist them in coordinating radio communications and whatever else would be necessary. And about an hour later, Rescue 907 lands in Yarmouth, and they transfer their 6 patients to medical care, but they are unserviceable, and I no longer have that helicopter for the rescue. So next slide, please. The weather is now, it's just getting worse. There's still 25 people on board, plus the 2 Canadian SARTECs. My next cormorant from Greenwood is still many hours away, if I can even get that one at all. It's not clear at this time because we have to get a crew together, plus get the other aircraft set up. The Coast Guard ship Cape Roger is still many hours away. The Jayhawks are approaching the end of their crew day. I'm unlikely to get any more sorties out of them. I check in with Boston to confirm the number of people that they can carry. And the rescue center in Boston responds 5, maybe 6 on each aircraft, on each helicopter. I'm really not liking how my math is adding up at this point. I reach out to the Jayhawks and I just ask them to take as many people as they can. One by one, the first Jayhawk is hoisting crew members from the vessel. The other Jayhawk makes the decision to dump some gear into the Atlantic to prepare the maximum amount of space that they can for crew members. The first Jayhawk manages to pull up 8 crew members, and then they depart for Yarmouth. And then the second Jayhawk is up, and somehow they manage to hoist 13 survivors onto their helicopter. So that's 21 total survivors that the Jayhawks hoisted. Plus I have 6 from the first cormorant. That left me with 4 crew members, the captain, the chief engineer, and 2 other essential personnel, along with my 2 SARTECs that actually affected the hoists, left to be rescued on the Atlantic Destiny at this point. Next slide, please. So Rescue 343 gets back on scene. 413 Squadron out of Greenwood confirmed that they can provide me with a new Cormorant helicopter and a new crew. I've tasked them and they've departed just past the 8 o'clock Zulu time from Greenwood, and they arrive at the Atlantic Destiny at about 10 Zulu. They immediately establish a guideline with the SARTECs on the vessel. As the hook from the hoist is being lowered, the cable snagged on the vessel's railing and it snapped. Then they switch hoists, and they send out the rescue basket to begin the first extraction. The vessel's hit with a very large wave. The basket contacts the railing and it snaps the second cable. So Rescue 904 snapped both cables before getting anyone off. Rescue 904 then dropped some equipment that they had on board to the vessel and to the remaining 6 people. The aircraft captain of 904 calls me directly at this point and on their satellite phone. And he's pretty clear that an alternate method of recovering these remaining people is needed immediately. He makes it clear, and he truly believes that there's little to no time that the vessel will still be afloat. So we make the plan to send them back to Greenwood and get the hoist cables switched out, and we'll have them return. We have the technicians that are working on the cormorant standing by in Greenwood with the right parts ready to go. Next slide, please. And about a half an hour following Rescue 907's failed attempts at the hoist, the Canadian Coast Guard vessel Cape Roger is now within sight of the Atlantic Destiny, and they launched their fast rescue craft, which is a rib essentially. When they get alongside, they actually are able to safely recover the last 4 crew members and the 2 SARTECs onto their fast rescue craft, and then they go back to the Cape Roger and hoist back onto the Cape Roger itself as well. Within approximately just 3 short hours, that vessel was fully submerged from the last person getting off. The Coast Guard vessel begins its sail back to Shelburne after they watch it go down. Next slide, please. So this mission, it was a long and difficult night. It had multiple snags, therefore it came with multiple plans along the way. But this mission actually resulted in 100% preservation of life in some of the most challenging conditions that we could have even operated in. I'd have you go ahead and click on that graphic and press play. This is at the time, it's the Minister of National Defense, and he put out a tweet the morning of the rescue thanking the crews.
Personally thank all of you for not just what you did, but my God, the amount of training, the initiative that would have taken to pull this off, and you saved everyone, and you kept everybody safe, even with the significant challenges that you faced. So I honestly, what I just wanted to do is just on behalf of the Prime Minister, myself, and all of Canada, just say thank you for what you did during this mission.
All right, thanks for that. And I guess we're going to be leaving questions till the end of my of the next presentation. So at this time, I will I'll pass it on over to you, Thuba. Thanks.
Thank you, Captain Park, and thank you for walking us through that mission. It's astonishing the complexity that's involved in these SAR missions. You're coordinating with all these different crew members, and you have to adjust things on the fly. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions about how you handle that kind of pressure later on. So thank you for walking us through that. So I'd like to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Major Richard Goff. Major Goff is a standards officer for Squadron 424 with the Canadian Armed Forces. He attended the Salt College Aviation Program, where he received a commercial multi-IFR pilot license prior to joining the RCAF in 1992. After training, he was posted to Squadron 413 in Nova Scotia on the CH-130 Labrador helicopter in 1997, where he logged approximately 1,500 flight hours before transitioning to the CH-149 Cormorant with Squadron 103 in Gander, Newfoundland. In 2006, he transitioned to the CH-146 Griffin as part of Operation Starfish. Throughout his 30-year military career, Major Goff has been deployed from Trenton to Afghanistan. He has flown close to 500 rescue missions and held the record for the farthest off-coast medevac for 317 nautical miles. So over to you, Major Goff.
Hi, good afternoon, folks, and thanks for the honor of allowing me to speak to you this noon hour. My presentation is not quite so dramatic as Steve's was. That was a pretty amazing account of what ended up being a phenomenal rescue, and bravo to 413 and the Coast Guard station in Cape Cod. That was just awesome. I'm just going to walk you through kind of a day in the life of what it's like at the helo side of the rescue squadron here at 424. We can go to the next slide now. And the main role of 424 Squadron is to conduct search and rescue operations, and that includes being prepared for major air disasters in Canadian North. Major air disaster is something that's more than 10 people. Essentially, we're looking at airliner traffic that does transpolar routes now. It's maybe not so much in COVID, but up until COVID took over, the transpolar routes were highly populated, and if an aircraft were to go down, we have assets here in Trenton and Winnipeg to be able to respond to a large number of casualties at one time. In addition, we do some civil air search and rescue training and evaluations. Those are our civilian counterparts that assist us in conducting the search and rescue mandate across the country. And the Hercules side of the house, they conduct routine or contingency airlift with C-130 Hercs. Day to day, we conduct routine operational training flights, as well as Griffin SAR conversions, where we take a relatively new helicopter pilot and teach him or her how to become a SAR pilot or flight engineer or SAR tech. Next slide, please. So many of you perhaps are familiar with the Bell 412 helicopter. These are just some basic specs on the aircraft. I've come to really cherish the reliability and the simplicity of the helicopter. It's a fantastic machine to work with. It's not quite a cormorant by any stretch, but the thing that I always tell the younger generation is that you can always count on the Griffin to start. So it'll never let you down on that regard. Next. So the yellow area is the area of responsibility, the search and rescue region for SRR Trenton. The green and the reds are Victoria and Halifax. And you can see we have a fair amount of land mass to cover. And essentially we do that with just the single Bell 412 here in Trenton. That may seem like a bit of a stretch, but we'll see a map a little bit later on about the number of cases. And our location here in Trenton is not by happenstance. So pretty much 85% of the missions are within sort of a 300-mile radius of us here in Trenton. We have a sister squadron in Winnipeg that flies the C-130 Hercules as well. And they obviously are able to deploy SARTEC, but the rescue assets will remain with us here in Trenton. Next slide. So day to day, our posture is Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. Where our crews are in the squadron, ready to go and to be airborne, responding to rescue tasking within 30 minutes. And then outside of those hours, we're on 2-hour standby, and typically the crews remain home. Occasionally, they'll come in to do some training in those hours, specifically night training. Crew of the helicopter is 5 people, 2 pilots, 1 flight engineer, and 2 search and rescue techs. In addition, we have about 80 maintenance crew that work with the squadron, and of course, we're 365 days, 24/7. Excellent. So, as far as operations, our Canadian STAR mandate has us taking care of marine incidents, air incidents, including the MAJAID that I mentioned a few minutes ago, as well as humanitarian assistance. Federally, the federal government, which appoints DND as well as the Coast Guard, to be responsible for all marine and all air incidents. Provincial authorities are responsible for humanitarian assistance. We back the provincial authorities up when they request it. Next slide. So this is a simulation of a major air disaster. We conduct exercises every year on and flesh out any problems or issues that we may have with staging and deploying our major air disaster kits. And that's about it. Next slide. So a typical STAR mission, if we can just talk about that, we can go to the next slide. It starts off by the search and rescue system being alerted, and that's a call that's received by JRCC for an overdue aircraft, a vessel, an ATVer, a skidooer, and it could be precipitated by a 911 call to an OPP dispatch center or a Sûreté de Québec center, dispatch center, in addition to all of the rest of those agencies that are listed. Essentially, any call that comes in to the police, if it's deemed an air or marine response is required, it gets diverted to the JRCC. Next slide. So RCC then determines whether it's a Canadian Forces DND responsibility. They gather the information required to determine who to task. And then if required, then they call us here at the squadron and give us the tasking. Oftentimes in the initial phases of a search or a rescue incident, they don't have a whole lot of information, but they want to get the crews moving toward where the situation is. So we'll often launch with just only the barest of information, and we pick up more information as we go along. Next slide. So we head out. The Griffin, as you may or may not know, it has about a 2.5 hour endurance. And that can take us about 250 to 300 nautical miles until we need to refuel. So depending on where we're heading, we head off to the search area. We get on scene, we coordinate with other searchers, which may be ground search teams, other air assets, like the civilians that I mentioned earlier, the Casera assets, or even our sister Hercules aircraft, who, because they're quite a bit faster, they usually get on scene ahead of us. Excellent. This is a picture of fellows searching inside the Hercules. Depending on the nature of the search, they can last for many, many days or weeks. In the summertime, with an aircraft that's overdue, searches could last an easy 2 weeks, and that's based on the survivability of the people that are in the aircraft. Survivability models decrease, obviously in the wintertime due to the cold temperatures, but in the summer, we've been on many searches that last for quite a few days. Next slide. So if there's a spotted aircraft or a person in the water, the next step in the mission is that the SARTECs get deployed. And they can do this either through the Hercules parachute door or via the hoist, and a couple of other methods on the helicopter. And we'll get to that in a second. So I think next slide is a video.
And Major Goff, if I'm correct, this would be video 5, right?
Video 2 or video 5, yeah.
Okay. Major, if you're trying to narrate, unfortunately, you are muted. You have to unmute yourself. I'll go ahead and start playing, and then you can unmute yourself and narrate.
Yeah, so for those that missed that, that was a kiteboarder that was in distress off of Oshawa. He raised the attention of people on the shoreline who could see his splashes. The way that the SARTEC were inserted there was called a free entry. Essentially, the helicopter comes in low and very slow, and the SARTECs jump into the water and swim to the survivor, and then they were recovered with a double up rescue sling, and then the second SARTEC came up solo. The free entry is the quickest way to get a SARTEC into the water to effect a rescue. So the next slide here shows that obviously the SARTECs get to provide medical assistance. Sorry, we're just maybe a little bit out of sequence with slides there. Chris, you can go back one. And essentially, the SARTECs just get the casualty stabilized until they can be recovered by the helicopter or another ground asset if that's available. And next slide. So that's a nice shot of the cormorant hoisting off of a vessel. The next step of the SAR mission is they're hoisted aboard, and usually, depending on the situation, our C-130 Hercules acts as our top cover and our communication platform as well. And next slide, I think we've got another video, Chris. Video 3.
There's the smoke.
So that was a quick compilation of a rescue that I was on a few years ago of a fellow with a heart condition about 25, 30 miles north of Attawapiskat, up along James Bay. I just wanted to demonstrate that hoisting is not the only method by which we conduct rescues. And in this particular case, this hunt camp was right along the beach. We were able to land on the beach. It was in April month. And yeah, when I talk about my confidence in the Griffin, I was very comfortable shutting the aircraft down, knowing that it would start back up and we could take the fellow back to Moosonee to the hospital. We had to shut down in order to save fuel, in order to get back to Moosonee. So we, all the crew helped out, pulled the fellow out of the hunt camp and loaded him on board with his spouse and took them back to Moosonee. Excellent. So this is the map that I was talking about, which shows that a large percentage of the SAR cases in the Trenton SRR are within a couple of refueling stops for the Griffin. You can see that obviously the Great Lakes are our bread and butter, and between May and May long weekend and September long weekend, we can usually have 2, 3, 4 missions a day. responding to various situations on the water, missing boaters, overdues, overturns, all kinds of marine incidents like that. Next slide. It's just a little bit of history lesson for the types of helicopters that we've flown here at 424. And of course, the Griffin in the lower left there is what we're currently with. Hoping to have the Cormorant come back in the next couple of years. I think we missed a video or two, Chris. Maybe video 4, if you don't mind.
Sure. Okay, Major Goff, we also have the video titled, you're muted at the moment, Major. Major, you were just muted. Sorry, we didn't hear what you said while the video was still on screen.
There we go. I think I have my sound back. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so that was just a quick snippet of hoist medevac off of Laker. Fellow had a heart attack or a heart issue rather, and needed to get to hospital ASAP. And you can see that reference the size of the vessel. Our helicopters is quite small, but it does the job okay. Next slide. That might be it, actually. Oh, there's one more, or two more, sorry. Just a quick graphic of some of the activities here at 424. And next slide concludes.
One quick note, Major, there is, I think, 1 or 2 videos that weren't played earlier. The intro video and I think video 2 may not have been played. I'm not sure if they're vital to your presentation, but if you think that they're interesting and you like to share them, we can go ahead and play them.
Yeah, absolutely, if you like, yeah. The intro video, it's about 3 or 4 minutes long, I think. Yeah, I can speak to the video too when we have it.
Sure. Okay, wonderful. Sorry for not playing those earlier. I'll go ahead and pull them up and get them played.
Thank you, Major Goff. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you for walking us through your operation, and those videos were fantastic. I have to say, they really give us a feel for how your operations are. So thank you. So Captain Park, if you want to come back online as well, we do have a few questions. All right, so I'll start with the first one here. Whoops. So the first one's for Captain Park. During that operation on Halifax, how many hours were logged on the helicopter asset during the rescue? Do you have an idea?
Gotta love tech.
Took me a moment to get unmuted. The question was, how many hours was logged on helicopters in total?
Yeah, during the operation, exactly, during the rescue.
Okay, so the operation itself, it took just over 12 hours to complete. I would have to just do quick estimations for how many hours. I might actually have them here.
Might be best guess, I guess, is good enough.
Yeah, so realistically, I got one flight out of each of them. None of them going to max gas or anything like that either. So I'd estimate each of the Jayhawks probably did about approaching 4 hours maybe each. And the first Cormorant gave me probably between 3 and 4 hours as well. And the second Cormorant would have been approximately maybe more about 3 hours for them.
Okay, okay. The next question could be for either you, and I'm not sure if you have information on this, but what kind of SAR upgrades are planned for the Cormorant and the Griffin for their systems, if you know of any SAR specific upgrades that are planned on the.
I'd probably pass that one over to you. Certainly I wouldn't know about the Griffin, but as for the Cormorant, I believe there's a midlife, but if you want to speak to it.
Yeah, so Cormorant midlife tender is out there right now. The contract hasn't been awarded, and to be honest, I'm not sure of where things lie with that. I think it's this coming fall that decisions will be made. But I believe they're increasing payload, as well as putting a better electronic sensor suite on the Cormorant for the midlife upgrade. As far as the Griffin, there's a Griffin limited life extension program underway currently. It's going to increase a little bit of the payload of the helicopter, as well as give us a little bit more advanced avionics than what we currently have, and a fourth axis autopilot, which will be nice.
Very good, thank you. And I think this next one's probably for Captain Park again. Could you elaborate on the cable snags and what protects the aircraft and the crew during that situation?
Not to keep passing it over to Mage, but I know that you've done hoists on the Cormorant in your career. I've never actually done any hoists on it. I'm usually on the other end of the phone, or I'm watching from another aircraft. So Mage, if you don't mind speaking to that, perhaps you could answer that question to their satisfaction.
Sure. So there are cable breakaway limitations on the actual cable itself. So once they reach their and it's a percentage of over their maximum load, they're designed to break away before they damage the helicopter or the crew.
Thank you for that. And so I'm just going to read out some of the questions, and either one of you can take them. So the next one is, how do the helicopter missions differ in the different SAR regions of Canada? For example, Pacific, Central, Atlantic. Are there differences in SAR regions in terms of, I guess, how the missions are conducted? Anything like that? I mean,
sure. So here on the East Coast, which is where as Major Goff showed in his slide, I'm doing Halifax, which is largely water-based. So all the helicopter things that I'm generally using are Cormorant related. I do, however, have access to some secondary SAR assets, which would include the Griffin out of East Bay, or is for remote areas. So my cormorant, like their bread and butter, what they do almost day in, day out is going to be medevac hoist from fishing vessels or other vessels that are at sea. The majority of my area is Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is a significant portion of how we do trade in North America. So there's constantly boats coming in and out. So regularly we're doing medevac missions for patients off of vessels with the cormorant. As for in the Trenton region, for example, everything is mostly based off of what the Griffin's able to do, as the Major showed as well. It's mostly down in like the lakes region, the Great Lakes. So they're also doing a lot of medevacs as well, but certainly it's much closer to land. And on the west coast of Canada, so JRCC Victoria, they're much like us. They don't go as far out at sea, but they're also utilizing the cormorant as their main rescue platform. They also end up having some mountainous rescue missions as well, getting people off mountains, or they get a little more air crashes out there as well, where they would be able to insert themselves into the mountainous region. Major, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's pretty right. The other thing, just recently in the news, obviously the cormorants were utilized in the Fraser River Valley to great success to evacuate people out of the flooded regions there. So that was a pretty astounding rescue situation.
Thank you both for the collaboration, and kind of a follow-up question on that. There are 3 SAR squadrons on the East Coast, Greenwood, Gander, and Goose Bay. Do they specifically have different roles or cover different territories?
Sure. So for primary SAR squadrons, it's really just Greenwood and Gander. Goose Bay ends up being a secondary resource for us, but they're not one of our primary SAR locations. So out of Greenwood, we are able to do all of our fixed wing missions. There is no fixed wing in the other 2 locations. Gander is exclusively cormorant, as is Greenwood. Both of them end up doing similar style missions in which they're doing medevacs. We're just doing one more North Atlantic for Gander, whereas you get more into the Straits of into Halifax, which is a major port city for Greenwood.
Perfect. Got a couple more questions here as well, so let me continue.
I guess maybe just to add to that too,
Sure.
Greenwood is also very responsible for like most of the fishing areas. There's a lot of fishing areas around Nova Scotia in particular, and Greenwood doing a lot of fishing related missions as well.
The next question I've got on here is around the cormorant aircraft itself. The question comes from Randy King. They're asking if there is an issue with the start restart on the cormorant, and if you can elaborate on that. I'm not sure if that says anything to you.
Sorry, you kind of cut out there, Tuva, during part of the question.
Yeah, so it's asking if there's any issue with the start restart on the cormorant.
I'm not sure of the actual question itself.
Yeah, I'm not.
From my time on the helicopter, the starter system worked pretty well as advertised. The aircraft, it had some glitches during the early years, but as far as the actual starting of the engines, there was never any issue in my time. And granted, it's been over 10 years since I've flown. So.
Right. Okay.
No, from my perspective of that, like I'm tasking them on a daily basis, and realistically, that doesn't come up. It's not a concern that any of the controllers have, that we're not going to have the cormorant restart or anything like that. They have done it for us pretty reliably over the years. Yeah.
And the next one that's up is how much time do you all spend training and preparing for the SAR operations? Is the training done in simulated environments like flight sims, or are they all real life kind of simulations, I'm going to say?
So we spend a good portion of our time, I would say if I had to do math, maybe 75% training, 25% actual operations. Steve, you maybe back me up on some of those numbers, but I think that that's probably realistic day to day. I just had a look at some of the search and rescue cases over the last few years, and 424 averages about 220 to 250 or 60 cases per year. And keep in mind, going back to what I said about the summertime, many of those are multiple during any single day. So it's not like we're, once every 2 days going on a mission. We've actually had quite a dry spell over the last 3 weeks or more. But yeah, day to day, we'll do 2 or 3 training missions per day. And then on an average sort of week, maybe 1 to 2 SAR missions. And that's give or take.
And I think that would be similar for what we see on the fixed wing assets as well, and what the East Coast has seen. As for working at the Joint Rescue Coordination Center itself, it's pretty much ops 24/7. So not obviously you're